For most celebrities, their pasts often remain hidden in the shadows until a sudden expose thrusts their mistakes and misdeeds into the public eye. However, Danny Trejo broke that mold entirely by being candid about his troubled history from the outset. Over the past 40 years, Trejo has become synonymous with roles as gangsters, prisoners, or violent criminals, characters that seemed almost too real, and for good reason. For the first 27 years of his life, Trejo wasn't just playing these roles, he was that person. In his early years, Trejo's reputation preceded him. A wrong glance or misplaced word could have dire consequences, and his volatile nature often ended in violence. Unsurprisingly, this led to him spending a significant portion of his youth behind bars, paying the price for his reckless and dangerous lifestyle. Yet Trejo's story didn't end in the prison yard. It was just the beginning of an extraordinary transformation. Danny Trejo's journey took him through the harshest realities of life, including his days spent in federal prison. What sets him apart from the usual Hollywood archetype of the reformed criminal is not just his unfiltered honesty about his past, but the incredible transformation he underwent after leaving prison. While many use fame and fortune to cover up their skeletons, Trejo built his legacy on redemption and resilience. His story is a testament to human survival against all odds, and it's almost unbelievable that he not only survived, but became one of Hollywood's most beloved figures. Hollywood's allure couldn't taint Trejo because he had already endured the kind of darkness few can comprehend. His lowest point came long before fame ever entered the picture. Introduced to heroin at just 12 years old by his uncle Gilbert, a man with his own troubled history, Trejo's descent into addiction and crime seemed inevitable. Yet the way he clawed his way out of this abyss is nothing short of miraculous. His story is one of grit, grace, and an unyielding will to rewrite his destiny. Danny Trejo's story is steeped in moments that reveal both the harshness of his upbringing and the distorted role models that shaped his early life. His uncle Gilbert, only 6 years older than him, played a pivotal role in introducing Danny to heroin, a devastating initiation that began at just 12 years old. Reflecting on those moments, Trejo recalled catching his uncle using the drug. In a twisted exchange, Danny threatened to report Gilbert unless he shared some with him. This marked the start of a downward spiral that would consume much of Trejo's youth. Trejo's family life was marked by violence and fear, particularly under the tyrannical rule of his grandfather. One haunting memory stands out: a young Danny trembling with fear as his grandfather screamed at him and Gilbert. Certain he was about to be hit, Danny clenched his body in terror, bracing for the inevitable blow. But when he glanced at Gilbert, he saw something extraordinary. His uncle, completely unfazed, nodding off into a heroin-induced haze as though nothing could touch him. To a frightened 12-year-old, this act of defiance appeared almost heroic, a moment of unshakable calm in the face of a storm. Danny's grandfather, enraged by Gilbert's behavior, stormed away, slamming the door. In the quiet aftermath, Danny looked at his uncle with awe. Gilbert, barely coherent, casually asked, "Did he hit us?" That moment left an indelible impression on Danny's young mind. Somehow he associated Gilbert's drug-induced detachment with invincibility, a twisted ideal of strength that he aspired to emulate. It's a stark reminder of how a child's perspective, especially one forged in chaos and fear, can distort reality. Trejo's path into addiction wasn't just about substance. It was tied to a desperate search for a way to cope, to feel powerful, and to survive in a world that often felt like it was out to crush him. Danny Trejo's journey into a world of violence, addiction, and crime was shaped early on by his chaotic upbringing. The reason? he lived with his grandparents was a direct consequence of his father's actions. After gaining full custody of Danny, his father stabbed a man and was sent to prison, leaving Danny effectively alone. From then on, he was raised by his grandfather, a hardened gangster, and his uncle Gilbert, a drug-addicted delinquent. This environment became the crucible that forged Danny's tumultuous childhood. Without a stable parental figure, Danny followed in Gilbert's footsteps. He developed a dependency on drugs and alcohol at a young age and became a participant in his uncle's criminal activities, including robberies and drug deals. These early choices led to a revolving door of juvenile detention centers, Trejo's second home during his formative years. Reflecting on this period, Danny has shared how his descent into criminal behavior felt almost inevitable in the environment he grew up in. The toxic blend of violence, substance abuse, and familial dysfunction made crime not just an option, but a way of life. Trejo's experiences during these years were a dark precursor to the struggles and triumphs that would later define his extraordinary story. Danny Trejo's early life was a chaotic cycle of trouble, deeply rooted in his environment. By the age of 12 or 13, he was already a regular in juvenile halls, although the offenses that landed him there started out as petty by legal standards. For Trejo, though, the line between petty and serious blurred quickly. Fighting, assault, and strong-arm robbery became routine. He vividly recalls how even taking money from a paperboy and threatening violence was considered strong-arm robbery. In his world, getting into trouble wasn't an anomaly, it was simply life. His troubles extended into school, where his behavior repeatedly got him expelled. Trejo admitted to being kicked out of junior middle school up to 11 times for reasons ranging from intoxication to fighting. These schools were melting pots, bringing together kids from 4 different neighborhoods, which naturally led to clashes. Gangs were an extension of one's neighborhood identity, and while Trejo didn't view himself as part of a formal gang, being from a particular area meant you were inevitably drawn into that world. In the 1950s, Los Angeles hadn't yet developed the highly organized gang culture we associate with the city today. However, it was still a dangerous place, filled with men who sold drugs, committed robberies, and engaged in violence. For Trejo, growing up in this environment meant that danger and crime weren't just inescapable, they were normalized. This unstructured but perilous world became the backdrop of his adolescence, shaping the man he would later struggle to leave behind. Danny Trejo's teenage years were defined by violence and survival in an environment where power and control were currency. The dangerous acts he engaged in, like robbing liquor stores with live grenades or committing violent assaults, weren't outliers in his life. To Trejo, they were simply how things were done. He had no concept that there could be another way to live. One incident that sticks out in his memory involved a fight with 2 sailors. The altercation began when the sailors were involved with a girl Trejo was with. In Trejo's world, a fight wasn't just a scuffle. It was a battle to win by any means necessary. He grabbed a bottle and used it as a weapon, stabbing the sailors and injuring them. After leaving the scene, police quickly caught up with him. Trejo remembers vividly how he was wearing a yellow shirt and khaki pants, which made him easily identifiable. He removed the clothing in a desperate attempt to evade capture, but it was too late. The authorities had him. This was just one example of the many violent encounters that peppered Trejo's early life. For him, these weren't acts of gratuitous violence. They were survival mechanisms in a world that demanded constant aggression. Such experiences highlight the depth of the chaos that defined his youth and the remarkable nature of the transformation he would later undergo. Danny Trejo's early years were marked by a seemingly endless cycle of arrests and incarcerations, each stint reinforcing his reputation as someone not to be trifled with. Trejo vividly recalls moments like being arrested after a fight, covered in blood, and the police taking him back to change into clean clothes before returning him to jail. These incidents were not isolated but part of a pattern that shaped his youth. From juvenile hall to youth authority camps and eventually prison, Trejo built a fearsome image. "I started building a reputation of being somebody you don't mess with way back in juvenile hall," he explained. In the system, that reputation was more than just a status symbol. It was a survival tool. People talked, and whether you were in a juvenile facility or a state prison, word followed you. Having a bad reputation could mean the difference between being left alone or constantly having to defend yourself. Trejo's life during this time revolved around a tough guy persona that not only kept others at bay but also perpetuated his dangerous lifestyle. It wasn't just a role he played, it was who he had become, a product of his environment and experiences. The transformation that would eventually take him from this world of violence to becoming a beloved actor and advocate is nothing short of extraordinary, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the ability to rewrite one's story. Danny Trejo's life story reads like a whirlwind of chaos, danger, and survival, with moments that almost defy belief. One such moment occurred during a brief stint in county jail in 1961, where he crossed paths with none other than Charles Manson. Trejo later described the infamous cult leader as a dirty, greasy, scrawny white boy, a seemingly insignificant encounter that foreshadowed just how deeply Trejo was embedded in a world filled with extraordinary figures and circumstances. However, as Trejo entered adulthood, the consequences of his actions began to carry heavier weight. In 1965, at just 19 years old, his life took a significant turn. Arrested for selling heroin to undercover federal agents, Trejo received a 10-year prison sentence. He has always maintained that what he sold was sugar, but regardless of the truth, this marked the beginning of his longest stint behind bars. For many, such a sentence would be a terrifying prospect, but for Trejo, prison felt inevitable. He had been preparing for it his whole life. When asked if he feared prison, Trejo's response reflected his unique perspective. "No," he said, comparing the system to a progression of stages, much like climbing the ranks in football. If you grow up in the system, it's like playing Pop Warner, then high school, then college, and finally the NFL. For him, transitioning from juvenile hall to prison was a natural progression in the alternate universe he inhabited. By the time he entered the penitentiary, he already knew many of the players, which eased his transition into what would otherwise be a harrowing environment. Trejo's resilience in the face of such circumstances is remarkable, but it also speaks to the deeply ingrained cycles of crime and punishment he was raised in. Prison was not a foreign or fearful place for him. It was simply another step in the life he had come to expect, a life that would eventually be upended by a transformation as dramatic as his past was dark. Danny Trejo's childhood boxing training turned into a lifeline during his years in prison, transforming his teenage scraps into a skill that could keep him alive. At facilities like San Quentin, where survival often hinged on physical dominance, Trejo's boxing prowess became legendary. "Being a good boxer got me through the penitentiary," he said. He wasn't just a capable fighter, he was a champion, holding lightweight and welterweight titles in every prison he served in. While the idea of a prison boxing champion might sound like something out of a Hollywood script, it was a reality in Trejo's time. During that era, prison systems made efforts to reform inmates, allocating resources for organized sports, including boxing programs. Matches weren't limited to the prison population either. Sometimes military teams from the Army or Navy would come in for exhibition bouts. These events were meant to foster discipline and provide inmates with constructive outlets. However, as Trejo humorously recalled, exhibitions didn't always go as planned. Inmates, especially the Mexican contingents, treated these bouts as anything but friendly sparring. "We've got money on you, Holmes," they'd say, raising the stakes for what was supposed to be a lighthearted match. Trejo had to adapt quickly. He'd either warn his opponent, "Go for what you know, Holmes," or take them by surprise. In this high-pressure environment, boxing wasn't just a sport, it was a survival skill. Trejo's experiences as a prison boxing champion not only shaped his reputation, but also prepared him for life outside of prison, where the discipline, grit, and toughness he honed in the ring would serve him in ways he could never have imagined. His journey from the yard to stardom is a testament to how skills developed in the harshest environments can pave the way for extraordinary transformations. Danny Trejo's ability to navigate the harsh and often deadly politics of prison life was rooted in his deep understanding of the unspoken rules that governed survival. Reflecting on his time inside, he explained that he treated every day as if it could be his last. This mentality wasn't paranoia, it was a survival strategy. If people know you truly believe that the bottom line to an argument is murder, then they don't want to argue with you, Trejo shared. In the unforgiving environment of prison, this belief became his shield. Trejo also developed a stark philosophy about emotions and conflict. "There is no such thing as I'm getting mad," he explained. "There's happy, sad, and rage. That's it." In prison, anger couldn't simmer or escalate slowly because hesitation could be fatal. "If I think I'm going to get mad at you, that probably means you're going to sneak up behind me and stab me in the back. So let's get this over with right away." This mindset, while brutal, was necessary in a place where time wasn't just precious. It was immediate. As Trejo described it, prison is the most right now place there is. Trejo's time in prison wasn't just about survival, though. He reminisced about the now-defunct athletic programs, particularly the boxing matches that had given him purpose and focus. "We had some great fights," he said, but lamented that today's prisons no longer offer such programs. Now it's just a warehouse for insanity. Without outlets like athletics to channel energy and emotions, Trejo recognized how much harder it would be for inmates to find moments of humanity in an otherwise dehumanizing environment. His ability to navigate and survive prison life was as much about his mental discipline as it was about physical toughness. Trejo's reflections offer a raw and unfiltered look at a world most people will never see, underscoring just how extraordinary his eventual transformation truly was. Danny Trejo's time in prison was not just about survival, it was a transformation that threatened to strip him of his humanity. Life behind bars was so volatile that death could strike in an instant, sometimes for reasons as arbitrary as someone else's missed or received letter. Trejo explained the constant tension. You can die because somebody you didn't know didn't get a letter, or got a letter. It's that quick. This brutal reality forced inmates to stay hyper-aware, knowing that even a seemingly calm moment could erupt into violence. As he adapted to this unforgiving environment, Trejo realized that he was becoming something he didn't recognize, a predator. If you're going to be a predator, then you become somewhat of a sociopath, he said, unfeeling. Screw them, they had it coming. This mindset, while necessary to survive, came at a cost, hardening him emotionally and pushing him further into darkness. One incident stands out in Trejo's memory as a stark example of this transformation. He was playing dominoes before a big game with a lot of money riding on it. With a prized run of fives in his hand, he was focused on the game, feeling triumphant. But suddenly, violence broke out. A man who had snitched was attacked, stabbed 6 times in the back right next to Trejo. The man fell onto the domino table, disrupting the game. Trejo's immediate reaction? Frustration at the interruption. "I was trying to push this guy out of the way," he recalled, still focused on his winning hand. That moment shocked him. His own detachment, the ability to casually push aside a dying man to focus on a game, was a wake-up call. It forced Trejo to confront the monster he had become, shaped by the relentless brutality of prison life. This realization would later play a pivotal role in his transformation, motivating him to find a way out of the cycle of violence and into a life of redemption and purpose. Danny Trejo's years in prison were filled with moments that blurred the line between survival and chaos. But one incident at Soledad State Prison in 1968 nearly ended his life entirely. By that time, Trejo had mastered the system. He knew how to make the right connections, stay out of unnecessary trouble, and defend himself when needed. Yet despite his savvy, he found himself caught up in an incident that could have led to the death penalty. The event unfolded during an exhibition baseball game between the prison team and an outside team composed of free citizens. It was a rare occasion, and the mood among the inmates, particularly the Mexican contingent, was celebratory. The atmosphere on the third base bleachers was fueled by drinking, partying, and drug use, creating a volatile situation. Trejo and his peers noticed a third baseman chewing gum, which immediately drew attention. Gum wasn't allowed in the penitentiary. One inmate, Ray, who had come down from Atascadero for a double murder charge, fixated on the gum like a child. "Danny, I want some gum," Ray said. He demanded it from the third baseman, who hesitated and refused. That hesitation cost him. Before the man could finish explaining, Ray punched him, triggering a chain reaction. In prison, a single act of violence often sets off a domino effect, and this punch was no exception. The fight erupted into a full-blown riot with hundreds of inmates involved. What had started as a baseball game quickly devolved into chaos, with bodies clashing everywhere. In the middle of the chaos, Trejo found himself caught up in the mayhem. When something goes wrong in prison, proximity can make you guilty, and Trejo knew he had to get out of there. "If you're near it, you did it," he explained. But as he fled the scene, clutching a prized run of dominoes from earlier in the day, the weight of the moment hit him. Back in his cell, still holding the dominoes, Trejo lay down and reflected. What am I becoming? The riot had severe consequences. Trejo and others were accused of participating, and the charges they faced could have resulted in the death penalty. This moment, among others, became a turning point for Trejo. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about deciding what kind of person he wanted to be. This near brush with the ultimate punishment would set him on the path toward self-reflection and eventually redemption. Danny Trejo's descent into solitary confinement, often referred to as the hole, marked the darkest period of his life. After being accused of throwing a rock at a guard during a riot, an allegation that carried severe consequences, Trejo was isolated in a place designed to break the human spirit. Solitary confinement was oppressive in every sense, stripping away normalcy, connection, and hope. Trejo, desperate to maintain his sanity, turned to his imagination, replaying scenes from his favorite films. He even acted out parts from The Wizard of Oz, a way to occupy his mind as he teetered on the brink of madness. In that claustrophobic cell with "God sucks" scrawled on the wall in feces, Trejo hit rock bottom. For the first time, he truly confronted the hopelessness of his life. With nowhere else to turn, he prayed. "Let me die with dignity, Lord," he pleaded. "I've got a reputation. Let me die with dignity. I will say your name every day and do whatever I can for my fellow man." It was a pivotal moment of surrender, a raw cry for redemption. To his surprise, his prayer was answered, not with death, but with mercy. Despite the gravity of the accusation, none of the 3,000 inmates stepped forward to corroborate the guard's claim that Trejo had thrown the rock. Without evidence or testimony, all charges against him were dropped. This turn of events felt miraculous, and in August 1969, Trejo was released on parole. At just 25 years old, he emerged from prison with no plan, no prospects, and no idea how to start over. What he did have, however, was a resolve to leave his life of crime behind and prove he was worthy of a second chance. Back in Pacoima, his old life beckoned. Uncle Gilbert, the man who had introduced him to drugs as a child, tried to pull Trejo back into the game as a drug dealer, but Trejo refused. For the first time, he was focused on building a better life. He started small, working odd jobs in junkyards, piecing together a semblance of normalcy as he tried to assimilate back into society. The road ahead was uncertain, but Trejo's determination to change set the foundation for the extraordinary transformation that would eventually make him a symbol of redemption and resilience. After his release from prison, Danny Trejo took steps to build a simple, stable life far removed from the chaos of his past. Starting with a gardening business, he eventually found his true calling as a drug counselor, helping recovering addicts at Western Pacific MedCorp, a position he still holds to this day. His life during this period wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it was honest, safe, and infinitely better than the years he spent behind bars. For 16 years straight after his release, Trejo remained sober and devoted himself to keeping the promise he had made in solitary confinement to help his fellow man. Trejo's dedication to recovery and service to others inadvertently set him on a path to Hollywood stardom. The turning point came in 1984, thanks to one of his acts of selflessness. Trejo was mentoring a young actor he had met at a Cocaine Anonymous CA meeting. These meetings are spaces where recovering addicts gather to support one another and share their struggles in a judgment-free environment. One day, the young actor called Trejo in distress. He was on a movie set where drug use, especially cocaine, was rampant, and he was struggling to resist temptation. Trejo, true to his role as a mentor, immediately went to the set to support the young man and ensure he didn't relapse. What Trejo didn't realize was that this simple act of kindness would change the course of his life forever. When Trejo arrived on set, his presence, demeanor, and the unmistakable air of someone who had lived a hard life didn't go unnoticed. Hollywood had no idea that one of its most distinctive future stars had just walked through the door. What started as an effort to help someone in need became the catalyst for an unexpected and extraordinary career in the film industry. Danny Trejo's journey to Hollywood began entirely by accident when he stepped onto the set of the 1985 action thriller Runaway Train at the age of 41. Trejo had only gone to the set to support the young actor he was mentoring, who was struggling to stay sober amidst a drug-fueled environment. However, as soon as Trejo arrived, his rugged appearance and commanding presence caught the attention of the crew. One of the crew members approached Trejo and asked, "Hey, do you want to be in this movie?" Trejo, a bit puzzled, replied, "What do I have to do?" The man said, "Do you want to be an extra?" Trejo, unfamiliar with industry lingo, responded, "Extra what?" The crew member clarified, "Can you act like a convict?" Trejo laughed and said, "I'll give it a shot." After all, playing a convict wasn't exactly a stretch for him. It had been his life for decades. When Trejo took off his shirt, revealing the massive tattoo of a woman in a sombrero on his chest, the crew was blown away. One of the guys even made an exaggerated gesture, and Trejo, thinking it was some kind of gang sign, jokingly flipped him off. Little did he know that tattoo and his authenticity were exactly what Hollywood needed. While on set, Trejo had a chance encounter with Eddie Bunker, a former convict turned writer who recognized Trejo from his boxing days at San Quentin. Bunker struck up a conversation and then made a proposition. Would Trejo train Eric Roberts, the film's star, for some boxing scenes? The offer came with more money for one day of training than Trejo typically made in a week. Trejo agreed, and his natural talent as a mentor shone through once again. After watching Trejo train Roberts and seeing how convincingly he fit the role of a criminal, the film's director, Andrei Konchalovsky, realized that Trejo wasn't just an extra, he was a perfect fit for the world of cinema. This unexpected gig marked the beginning of Trejo's acting career, launching him from a life of hardship into one of success and recognition. What started as a favor to help a friend ended up changing his life forever. Danny Trejo's role in Runaway Train as Eric Roberts' boxing opponent was just the beginning of his unexpected Hollywood career. The authenticity he brought to the role opened the door to more opportunities. Trejo quickly found himself cast in roles like Inmate Number 1, Bad Guy Number 1, or Tattooed Guy. These parts, though small, resonated with directors because Trejo wasn't just playing a criminal, he had been one. His raw authenticity made every performance compelling. Trejo recalled how his earliest acting gigs became informal training. The director would see me and, since I was SAG, he'd say a line, Trejo explained. The first 5 years of my career, I'd say things like, I'll kill that son of a bee, and they'd say, wow, that was perfect. Ironically, Trejo was now being paid to portray the very person he had been for much of his life. This was especially evident in films like Heat, Con Air, and Blood In, Blood Out, where his performances were chillingly believable because they mirrored his lived experiences. Despite his rising success, Trejo never became starstruck by Hollywood's glitz and glamour. Acting was a job, one that paid far better than anything else he could have hoped to land given his criminal record. Trejo had no background in theater or childhood dreams of becoming a star. Unlike those who spent their lives preparing for the stage or screen, he approached acting with a pragmatic mindset. It was a means to make a living, one that required far less risk than his old life of crime. Trejo's grounded attitude toward his newfound career allowed him to stay humble and focus on what mattered most, staying sober, helping others, and building a better life. Acting wasn't about fame for him. It was about creating a future that would never lead him back to the darkness of his past. This perspective, combined with his undeniable presence on screen, turned Trejo into one of Hollywood's most recognizable and respected figures. Danny Trejo's early roles may have been minor, but the people around him, directors, producers, and fellow actors, saw potential beyond Tough Prisoner Number 1. His first role with a name was in Death Wish 4, The Crackdown, where he played Art Sanella. On that set, Trejo struck up a friendship with Charles Bronson, a Hollywood legend, who invited him to work on another project called Forbidden Subjects. Trejo's approach to building his career was simple. He said yes to every opportunity. This hustle kept him bouncing from one movie set to another, often working every other month on a new project. Trejo attributed his success to his philosophy of helping others. Everything good that has happened to me has happened as a direct result of helping someone else, he said. This mindset not only defined his personal life, but also guided his approach to his acting career, creating opportunities he might not have otherwise encountered. For about a decade, this steady stream of small roles kept him afloat and eventually set the stage for something bigger. That breakthrough came with Desperado in 1995, a film directed by Robert Rodriguez. The movie follows El Mariachi, a guitar-wielding gunslinger on a mission of revenge against a powerful drug lord. Along the way, he partners with Carolina, played by Salma Hayek, who becomes both his love interest and ally. Trejo landed the role of Navajas, a fearsome assassin hired by the drug lord Bucho. His character was memorable not only for his stoic demeanor, but also for his deadly weapon of choice, throwing knives. The ironic twist? Trejo's performance in Desperado, which became one of his most iconic roles, didn't require him to speak a single line, yet his intense presence, honed through years of real-life experience in small roles, made a lasting impression. Desperado gave Trejo visibility in Hollywood and established him as more than just a background player. It was the beginning of his rise to becoming a household name, proving that even silent roles can speak volumes when played with authenticity and grit. In Desperado, Danny Trejo's role as Navajas became a pivotal moment in his career. Playing the assassin tasked with eliminating El Mariachi, Navajas wielded throwing knives with deadly precision. The showdown between Navajas and El Mariachi was a brutal, high-stakes fight that almost resulted in the hero's death. Although El Mariachi narrowly escaped, the fight became one of the most iconic scenes in the film. The movie itself was a massive success, grossing $58 million worldwide on a modest $7 million budget. Trejo's portrayal of Navajas garnered him global recognition, remarkably, without a single line of dialogue. Robert Rodriguez, the film's director, once paid Trejo a compliment that summed up his unique screen presence. "You can say more with your face than most actors can say with a page of dialogue." Trejo reflected on this, noting that such an ability came from practice and from survival. In San Quentin, sometimes you've got to be able to say, "I'll kill you," without saying a word. Trejo's time on the Desperado set also marked a serendipitous encounter with Salma Hayek. When Trejo first saw her, he was stunned. Hayek bore an uncanny resemblance to the woman tattooed on his chest, a striking image of a woman in a sombrero that had been with him for decades. According to Hayek, Trejo's reaction was unforgettable. "He ran toward me and ripped his shirt off," she recalled. Trejo exclaimed, "I knew you before I knew you. I dreamed of you before I knew you." Sure enough, the tattooed figure on his chest bore a striking likeness to Hayek, as though life had imitated art. This moment added a surreal layer to Trejo's journey, blending the worlds of his past and present in a way only Hollywood could deliver. Desperado wasn't just a breakout role for Trejo, it was a turning point that solidified his place in the industry and opened the door to an enduring career as one of Hollywood's most distinctive and beloved figures. Danny Trejo's iconic chest tattoo, a woman in a sombrero, has become a defining symbol of his image and story. Its origins are as gritty as his life itself. The tattoo was the work of an inmate artist named Harry, whom Danny met during his time at San Quentin. Harry was just starting out as a tattoo artist and approached Danny with a request: "Let me do my first tattoo on you." Armed with nothing more than a guitar string as a makeshift needle, Harry began outlining the design. The process didn't go smoothly, though. After the initial outline was done, Trejo got caught up in some trouble at San Quentin and was transferred to Folsom Prison. Before they parted ways, Harry urged Trejo not to let anyone else finish the tattoo. "Don't let anybody touch it. I'll be in Folsom," Harry assured him. Sure enough, about 6 months later, Harry arrived at Folsom. Trejo joked about the improbability of it. How do you even get kicked out of San Quentin? But he managed. When Harry finally joined Trejo at Folsom, he resumed work on the tattoo. He completed more of the intricate design, but the two were separated again when a massive race riot broke out at Folsom. Trejo was transferred to another prison, leaving the tattoo unfinished once more. Despite the interruptions and chaos, the tattoo became a piece of living art, as much a part of Trejo's story as the man himself. The tattoo not only represents Trejo's life behind bars, but also the resilience and camaraderie he experienced along the way. What began as a simple favor for a fellow inmate has evolved into a visual emblem of Trejo's extraordinary journey, from prisons to movie sets, from chaos to redemption. As Trejo himself once joked about the tattoo, when meeting Salma Hayek, the body might have been a little better on the tattoo, but let's pretend it's exactly like you. Danny Trejo's chest tattoo, completed across 3 prisons, San Quentin, Folsom, and Soledad, became a metaphor for the winding, chaotic path of his life. Harry, the inmate who first began the tattoo, was so committed to finishing it that he pleaded with Trejo at each prison they found themselves in. "Danny, please, this is my first tattoo. Let me finish it." Trejo ultimately carried that tattoo through the most formative and tumultuous years of his life, never imagining that one day it would become part of his Hollywood persona. After a decade or so in the film industry, Trejo found himself firmly typecast, though he didn't immediately recognize it. According to Charles Ramirez Berg, a film professor at the University of Texas at Austin, Latino characters in Hollywood have long been confined to 6 stereotypes: the bandito, the harlot, the buffoon or clown, the Latin lover, and the dark lady. These archetypes, outlined in Berg's book Latino Images in Film, have historically placed Latino characters in narrow, often degrading roles. Whether as villains or comic relief, these depictions rarely offer depth or agency, serving primarily to bolster white protagonists. Trejo, for much of his early career, was slotted into the bandito archetype. His scars, rugged appearance, and brown complexion were treated as shorthand for villainy. These roles often lacked any backstory or motivation, reducing his characters to menacing, one-dimensional criminals. Yet Trejo didn't resent being typecast. For him, each role was an opportunity to work and build a life far removed from his past. Trejo recalled a moment during his first significant interview that captured his perspective. She says, "Danny, don't you get tired of being typecast?" he remembered. For Trejo, the question was almost amusing. Typecasting might have been a constraint in the eyes of others, but for him, it was a lifeline, a way to sustain his new life and avoid slipping back into the chaos of his past. Over time, Trejo's consistent presence in Hollywood began to challenge the limits of these stereotypes. While he started as the quintessential bandito, his authenticity and charisma would eventually elevate him to roles with greater depth and nuance, redefining how Latino characters could be portrayed on screen. When asked if he ever felt typecast, Danny Trejo had a straightforward response. "What do you mean?" he asked. The interviewer clarified, "You're always playing the mean Chicano dude with tattoos." Trejo paused and then laughed. "Well, I am the mean Chicano dude with tattoos. Go with what you got, you know? I wouldn't make a good car salesman. Buy this or I'll kill you." Trejo embraced the roles of villains and tough guys, but he did so with purpose. Throughout his career, he made it a point to ensure that his characters always faced the consequences of their actions. Whether they died or ended up in prison, Trejo wanted his roles to serve as cautionary tales. By showing the harsh realities of a life of crime, he aimed to dissuade audiences from romanticizing it. This approach starkly contrasts with Hollywood giants like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Vin Diesel, whose contracts famously prohibit their characters from losing fights or dying. Trejo, on the other hand, embraced mortality on screen, turning it into a powerful teaching moment. His commitment to this principle paid off in a way that cemented his place in Hollywood history. Trejo holds the record for the most on-screen deaths of any actor, surpassing Christopher Lee with 65 recorded deaths. Despite his reputation as Hollywood's go-to bad guy, one director saw the deeper, more inspiring side of Trejo and sought to bring that to the screen. That director was Robert Rodriguez. Rodriguez recognized that Trejo was more than the sum of his tough guy roles. He saw an honest, humble, and inspiring man whose real-life transformation deserved to shine. The result was one of Trejo's most iconic roles, not as a villain, but as a hero, Uncle Machete in Spy Kids. In Spy Kids, Trejo played Machete Cortez, a gadget-wielding, resourceful uncle who helps his niece and nephew save the day. The role showcased a softer, more nurturing side of Trejo, while still allowing him to embody the rugged charisma he was known for. It was a groundbreaking moment that showed Hollywood and the world that Trejo could do more than play the bad guy. It also laid the foundation for his most famous standalone character, Machete, which further redefined his legacy and showcased his range as an actor. The Spy Kids franchise became a major milestone in Danny Trejo's career, transforming him from a notorious on-screen bad guy into a beloved family-friendly hero. The 2001 film follows siblings Carmen and Junie Cortez, who discover their parents are retired spies and must step up to save them when they are kidnapped by the villainous Floop. Blending comedy, high-tech gadgets, and action in a kid-friendly format, Spy Kids struck a chord with audiences of all ages. Danny Trejo's character, Machete, is Carmen and Junie's inventive uncle, known for his resourcefulness and tough, no-nonsense personality. Machete became an instant fan favorite, with memorable moments like the one where Carmen thanks him for letting them stay at his workshop. When she remarks that family must mean more to him than money, Machete deadpans, "No, that means you owe me financially." The humor and grit Trejo brought to the role resonated with both kids and adults alike. Financially, Spy Kids was a blockbuster, grossing over $147 million on a $35 million budget. Its success spawned a highly popular franchise with several sequels. Beyond the box office, the film was culturally significant, as it positively represented a Latino family in an empowering way, something rare in Hollywood at the time. For many children, Machete became a symbol of cool ingenuity and bravery, and Trejo himself became a part of their childhoods. Once you become a childhood hero, or even just a part of someone's childhood, you have fans for life, Trejo reflected. The outpouring of admiration was overwhelming. Kids began approaching Trejo in public, calling him Uncle Machete, and asking for autographs. The role not only endeared him to a younger audience, but also laid the groundwork for his biggest leading man role to date. In 2007, Grindhouse, a double feature directed by Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino, included a fake trailer for a film called Machete. Rodriguez created the trailer as a tongue-in-cheek homage to 1970s exploitation films, with Trejo starring as Machete, a knife-wielding ex-federal agent turned unstoppable force of justice. The trailer was over-the-top, gritty, and wildly entertaining, leaving audiences clamoring for a full-length film. This teaser marked the beginning of a new chapter for Trejo, solidifying his transformation from a supporting character actor to a bona fide leading man. Machete would soon become not just a movie, but a cultural phenomenon, and Danny Trejo's legacy as a cinematic icon was cemented. The overwhelming popularity of the Machete trailer in Grindhouse took both Danny Trejo and Robert Rodriguez by surprise. Fans couldn't get enough of the gritty, knife-wielding anti-hero, and demanded a full-length feature. Trejo recalled, "Danny and I couldn't go down the street without people asking for the movie. Rodriguez realized there was a glaring absence of a Latino action hero in mainstream cinema. People needed it. They wanted a Latino character because they'd never seen it before," he explained. This fan demand drove Rodriguez and Trejo to bring Machete to life. The full-length film Machete premiered in 2010, with Trejo as the action star who takes on corrupt politicians and criminals who exploit and harm vulnerable communities. The movie wasn't just an action-packed revenge flick. It boldly tackled issues like immigration, racism, and the exploitation of undocumented workers. Trejo's character wasn't merely a caricature or sidekick. He was the hero, the romantic lead, and the figure audiences cheered for. Importantly, Machete wasn't reduced to the Latin lover stereotype that Hollywood often leaned on for Latino leads. Trejo was a tough, principled, and deeply relatable protagonist, breaking new ground in how Latino characters were portrayed on screen. Machete marked the peak of Danny Trejo's Hollywood career, firmly establishing him as a leading man. But unlike many stars who might pivot to large-scale fame or chase similar roles, Trejo stayed true to his philosophy and work ethic. He continued accepting a wide range of roles, many of them small or tertiary, and embraced everything from indie films to blockbuster productions. For Trejo, acting was never about chasing stardom or proving himself. It was about staying grounded, working hard, and doing what he loved. Trejo's approach to his career stood out in an industry that often prioritizes climbing the fame ladder. His willingness to take on any role, big or small, allowed him to remain a prolific actor and a fan favorite, all while staying connected to his humble beginnings and the principles that guided his transformation from convict to cinematic icon. Danny Trejo's career choices and life trajectory reflect a profound sense of gratitude and humility. Unlike many celebrities who become fixated on maintaining a certain status or pursuing only leading roles, Trejo embraced every opportunity, big or small, with the same enthusiasm. He didn't mind being typecast or playing secondary characters. His focus was on appreciating the second chance he had been given. For a man whose life once seemed destined for failure, marked by addiction, crime, and imprisonment, each day in Hollywood was a reminder of how far he had come. Trejo was determined to make the most of it. In 2016, Trejo expanded his reach beyond the silver screen and into the culinary world with the opening of his first restaurant, Trejo's Tacos, in Los Angeles. What began as a single taco shop quickly grew into a thriving chain, including Trejo's Cantina and Trejo's Coffee and Donuts. Trejo also released a cookbook and launched his own line of hot sauces, which have become fan favorites. His ventures weren't just superficial side projects to capitalize on his fame. They were driven by his genuine passion for food and his desire to share it with others. Trejo's love for food and his hands-on approach set his culinary ventures apart from typical celebrity cash grabs. His restaurants and products have garnered high ratings thanks to their quality and authenticity. Trejo's menu celebrates flavors inspired by his Mexican heritage while embracing inclusivity with options for vegans and vegetarians, showing his commitment to making his establishments welcoming to all. In addition to his restaurants, Trejo ventured into the beer industry, further diversifying his portfolio while staying true to his roots and passions. Whether it's through tacos, donuts, or beer, Trejo's entrepreneurial endeavors are an extension of his character, authentic, approachable, and full of heart. They reflect the same resilience and grit that have defined his journey, proving that even in new ventures, Trejo's story continues to inspire. Danny Trejo's life story continues to inspire, marked by his resilience, humility, and dedication to making the most of his second chance. In addition to his successful restaurants, Trejo expanded his ventures into craft beer with Trejo Cerveza and launched a record label, Trejo's Music. Despite these accomplishments and indulging in the fruits of his labor, Trejo has remained grounded, never letting success overshadow his humanity. A poignant example of Trejo's character came just a few years ago when he became a real-life hero. At 75 years old, Trejo witnessed a car accident involving an overturned vehicle. Without hesitation, he ran to the scene and helped rescue a baby trapped inside. Trejo humbly reflected, "The only thing that saved that little kid was God." While he may play villains on screen, in reality, Danny Trejo is a man of remarkable courage and kindness. For Trejo, Hollywood and social status mean little. Although he enjoys acting, he views it as a job, one that enables him to provide a decent life for his 3 children. Now, at 80 years old, he remains deeply grateful for his safety, health, and sobriety. Trejo recently celebrated 51 years of being sober, a milestone he cherishes as much as any accolade. True to his promise made decades ago, he continues to serve as a drug counselor, helping others navigate the struggles he once faced. Trejo's genuine authenticity has earned him admiration not just from fans, but also from those who work with him. His humility and dedication to staying true to himself set him apart in an industry often associated with superficiality. He frequently reflects on his journey in conversations with God. "I talked to God a couple of days ago," Trejo shared. "I said, how am I doing?" And he said, "You're almost out of hell. Keep it up. You're doing great." Trejo's story is a testament to the power of redemption, hard work, and gratitude. From surviving a tumultuous past to becoming a beloved figure on and off the screen, Danny Trejo is proof that it's never too late to rewrite your narrative and use your experiences to lift others along the way.